Welcome to another great episode of Dre and Smiley, the Inner Circle Podcast.
Dre, I'm so excited to have Tom Wyman on our podcast today. I want to first thank Tom for his service. He's a military representative, but let me go through his bio. Tom grew up in Connecticut, graduated from Providence College, U.S. Army basic training in Fort Dix, Warrant Officer School, Flight School, advanced flight training. He married his high school sweetheart. He actually opened up a flower shop. I can't wait to understand that. But from the flower shop, he got his entrepreneurial skills and he went into real estate. After doing that, he was in a motorhome with two kids and traveled all over the place. And now he's settled in Florida. So, Tom, thank you for being on the podcast. And I would say Dre have found a lot of real estate people, but we've never had a flower entrepreneur or owner. If you could tell us, how did you go from the military into flower ownership?
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. First of all, thank you very much. When I spoke earlier and you said, "Hey, you should try," you're interesting. We'd love to have you on our podcast. I'm like, I'm not really interesting. I'm just kind of a normal guy, but I'll give you a little backstory. How I got to that point because I've always kind of been, I wouldn't necessarily entrepreneurial. I never thought that, just a hard worker, right? Even all through high school, I stopped playing baseball because I had a boss. I worked on a farm that said, whenever you can get here, we can put you to work. So I arranged my schedule, and by noon I was out of school and working on the farm. And by the time I was 16, I was running a crew. And so that's kind of the roots of the work, kind of the work ethic that I had. When I got out of high school, I only applied to one college. I had a little tendency to party a little bit in high school, and I wanted some I had the pull for military just because my dad was in the service, my uncle was in the service. I had that. I always, those are kind of the jobs that I feel you're called to do, whether it's a firefighter, a preacher, a cop, military person. And so I had that pull. So I applied to a military college in Vermont called Norwich University. And I went there my freshman year and quickly realized that I did not like mixing the military and the education part of it. And I transferred to Providence College, as you mentioned in my bio, and graduated from Providence. And that's when my kind of military journey started. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot, and didn't know anything about the military, the process, the recruiting process. So I assumed Air Force had planes and helicopters. Went to the Air Force, didn't have enough chemistry and physics, so I applied to the Navy, and I got accepted as what they call the RIO, Radio Electronics Officer, which again, at that time, naive kid, didn't know what that meant. I said, well, is that the right seat, the left seat? Am I in charge? Am I flying? And the guy's like, well, no, that's the electronics. I go, well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be a pilot. He goes, well, you didn't get accepted as a pilot. And I wanted to fly helicopters. He goes, well, kind of the flunkies in flight school get the helicopters. They get them. They didn't choose them. They wanted to fly jets. But he said, the Army's got all the helicopters. I go, oh, really? Okay. Took my stack of paperwork, went across the hall. And, 9 months later, I'm heading off to, as you mentioned, basic training, Warrant Officer School, and flight school. So during flight school is when the Army decides, like, your class of 26 that are graduating in 4 months, we need 5 Blackhawks, 3 Apaches, 1 Chinook, whatever. And then they try to match, like on a dream sheet you fill out that you say, I'd like to go to Germany, because that was my first choice. I want to go to Germany. So just a quick backup on that. During flight school is when I got married. So I literally flew home on a Thursday, rehearsal dinner Friday, married Saturday, and flew back to flight school on a Sunday.
Wow.
And so, my wife and I, newlyweds, we were like, hey, let's go to Germany, And so when aircraft selection came down, which is, what I just mentioned, it's based on class ranking. I was fortunate enough to be ranked number 1 in the class. And in my mind, I always thought that if I was not going to stay in the military, I want to fly and get qualified with the most advanced aircraft, and which is not necessarily shoot guns and missiles. It's more of twin rotor, twin engine. That's the most sophisticated helicopter you can fly. You can fly anything else under that, right? And so the class, we had one Chinook, and I took that Chinook, but it wasn't going to Germany. It was going to Fort Lewis, Washington. And I was like, okay, not really my first choice, but that's what happened. And so, but after you graduate, everybody graduates flying Hueys. After you graduate, you go to the advanced courses where you learn how to, do in your particular aircraft, like Chinooks, it's sling loads and loading and things like that. And about 2 weeks before we were done with our advanced course, the Army came down and said, oh, we need another Chinook for your class. And of course, I had chosen the first one. Then I went to the second person in the class, and it was a female, and said, she jumped on it, and it was going to Germany. And I'm like, darn it. And so for 24 hours, you get 24 hours to switch. And I was begging her, come on, please change. And she's like, nope, nope, nope. Her bags got shipped. And about 3 days before she was supposed to go over there, her orders got changed to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So she never went there. So
Dodged the
anyway,
bullet, yeah.
Yeah, and just from a big understanding of how the Army worked, I was one of the first. I was probably the third class of Chinook pilots coming right out of flight school, because Chinooks traditionally in the Army had been where guys that had been there for 20, 30 years went after they'd flown Hueys for a long time. So you get to a unit, in my case, there's 30 pilots. Well, there's 2 of them that are like newbies, like us. And so we're kind of, looked down upon a little bit,
Okay.
but the knowledge base you could gain by being in an people that had been in the service for that long was kind of awesome. So, flew around Washington. I got deployed to Honduras to do what's called medical readiness training exercises, which is like med rets. So the Army trains up veterinarians, doctors, and dentists. So we would literally fly 3 Chinooks out in the middle, like over banana fields for hours, and we'd land, and it would be coordinated through the Honduran government, where people had walked with their pig and their cow, and they brought their kids. They'd walk for 2 or 3 days, and we would set up a camp, and that's how our dentists and doctors learned, practice. And
sure.
So I had a great experience, and but I did realize, for me personally, that my ADD, or whatever the case may be, I knew I probably wasn't going to stay in. It just, in some cases, it kind of bred mediocrity. People were doing as little as possible and still get a paycheck. Just my personal experience. But while in the service, I tore my ACL. And so the perception to the Army was, you can't fly right now. You're grounded. Your wings are clipped. So if you don't have anything to do, don't do it here. And so that's led to, again, maybe my ADD or whatever the case may be. I had a friend in college whose brother owned a flower shop, and talked about how profitable it was, even though it's a perishable product and there's some other idiosyncrasies about it. And so while I was grounded, my wife and I looked to buy a flower shop with this new, out in Washington State. It was a new concept. This is way before flowers were in grocery stores. We were going to open a pocket store, because it's the temperature, average temperature, it's like being in a cooler, outside. So big outdoor displays, flowers in buckets. And so I met this guy, and I couldn't afford to buy his flower shop, but here's the one thing that I did was probably one of the best decisions I made. So I decided I was going to open my own, did a business proposal, borrowed money from my sister, my parents, my grandparents, maxed out a credit card, found a location, negotiated as a nobody to do all my leasehold improvements myself, to completely gut the building and build the cooler and the shelves. And But the biggest thing I did was hired this guy as a consultant. Back then it was $5,000 to help me open my own flower shop. And so he guided me. The biggest thing he did was, for the first 3 months, 90 days, he allowed me to purchase inventory on his credit. And so when we opened the doors of that flower shop, the trucks backed up. I had a fully stocked, because normally it's cash on delivery, right? When you're a new business, nobody knows you. And anyway, that's how I got into the flower business.
Wow. And it's so ironic you say it that way, because with the last 5-10 seconds, when you said the guy allowed him to use you, he allowed you to use his money. Is that similar from a real estate, like he seller financed the start of your business? Would you say it's close to that, or it's totally opposite, apples and oranges?
I was allowed to use his credit, not his money.
Okay.
So it's a little different. He wasn't an investor, like investing money that I had to pay back. I got that money. The money came, like I mentioned, from family and friends, and I think I borrowed about $45,000 back in the day. But no, by having his credit, and I'll tell you, if I was to do it again, because I'm considering opening another business here, crazy. But somebody who's been successful in this, what I'm thinking about doing, I actually flew up, met with her in North Carolina, and proposed the same kind of thing. If I'm gonna go down this path, could I hire you as a consultant? You can come down here. We can look at the piece of property. We can, go through the process of licensing and permitting and all that. And she said, sure, yeah. So it's a great
Interesting.
concept. I mean, it's smart, right? Use somebody else's knowledge, somebody who's already been through this, to try to help because time is money. And if you can just
That's right.
shortcut the process by a
Right.
month, 3 months, 5 months, that's huge. So
It is. It is. Yes, it's interesting that people build industries on creating shortcuts for people, and they call them masterminds, things like that.
Mhm.
The added benefit that you had in that flower shop is the ability to use that person's credit, which gave you another leg up,
Yep.
ahead of the average new business owner. So hearing your story though, Tom, it's fascinating on so many levels. You've led a life just from being in the military to owning a flower shop. Just if you were to stop right there, most people haven't lived, right? Most people, they go work at some corporation for 30 years, they retire, they sit on the porch and watch the cars go by, right? So you just from the military, just to that flower shop is a pretty exciting life. I've always been fascinated with the idea of being a pilot. I've never pursued it. My father-in-law was a pilot, a private pilot. Well, he
Mhm.
got his private license, is what he had, and his story is pretty fascinating. He was a sharecropper,
Mm.
and had a long life, and then decided to become a pilot. Just that journey alone is pretty fascinating. So pilots have a special place in my heart, I guess you could say. Going on to become an owner of a business, pretty fascinating. Something else that you do that is really fascinating, and maybe you can give me some advice here, Tom. Living in an RV, right, with two kids. Let me share this quick story, Tom. I want you to tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what I did wrong here, Tom. I decided to have a great weekend with my family. I'm going to get an RV. They're going to love it. We're going to spend the weekend in there, drive out of town to this little campsite. They'll be all excited. So sure enough, pull the RV up. They come home from school. The kids see it. They're excited. My wife is, I'm not sure, but we'll give it a try.
Sure.
There was maybe a ant, maybe two ants. It wasn't infested. Complaining started. Come on, guys, we can do this. Made the trip of 3 hours out, got to the campsite, set everything up. It was camp, kind of a resort type place. So they had cabins as well.
Hmm.
Set everything up, got the food out, and I'm excited. Come on, guys, it's family time, RV time. The wife and the kids slept in the cabin. What did I do wrong, Tom? Listen, Tom, I slept in that RV by myself those 2 days, and each night was glorious. The wind was blowing through. I thought, how can they miss this? Don't they understand what they're missing? What am I doing? What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong?
Well, I think if there's a fundamental problem, it was probably that you didn't go further away, like in some tourist thing,
Ah,
get away. And in this day and age, who knows? I don't know the age of your kids, and they're missing their friends, or they didn't have internet connectivity, whatever the case may be. I'm talking, when I did this, it was 1990, 91.
okay,
Okay, so
okay,
long time ago. But I'll tell you the impetus for it, because this is another part of my journey, was,
yeah,
so the flower shop's up and running. I do decide to get out of the military. My wife is running the flower shop, and again, maybe it's the ADD thing. I go out and start selling real estate, start commercially or residentially, moving to commercial, specialize in Section 1031 exchanges, which is a way for investors to
yeah.
and grow without paying taxes on each transaction. And but I had this bug. I had this bug to be an actor, and
Ah,
it was an itch that I had to finally scratch. And so we decided that we would go somewhere, and not in Washington State. for me to try to scratch this itch. So we put the shop on the market, which is, if you've ever sold a business, it's challenging because the perception is you're failing. Why would you sell your business, right? You're failing, right? And it was quite the opposite. We're successful, and that's actually the best time to sell your business, right? When the numbers don't lie.
Sure.
And so, but it took a long time. It took a while, and I was very proud of the fact that we had 8 full-time staff, and would ramp up for Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, of course. But meanwhile, I had bought a piece of land and started literally the day I broke ground on my new house, the shop sold.
Wow.
And so between the process of selling the shop and building the house, we built the house and we lived in it 11 days less than a year when we bought the motorhome, and decided I would start to try to scratch that itch. And so we started out in December. We had kind of a initial schedule with the motorhome with 2 kids, 3 and 6 months. And so we kind of raced down, just to miss the snow. We kind of raced down to LA and then back up to New England, where I grew up, and spent some time. The holidays camped out in my parents' backyard. And then we kind of started the journey, worked all the way down to Key West, and then kind of back up, zigzagged across the country all the way back out to Washington State. But ultimately decided to settle in Orlando because the misperception is that Disney and Universal Studios are these big hubs for acting, and it's not really the case. But Florida is a good place for working actors to do commercials, because commercials get shot here all year round. And so we landed in Central Florida, and I started taking classes and pursued full-time acting for about almost 3 years. And
Wow.
realized quickly that I have to be a responsible father and provide and more stability. And that's when I kind of got into the tech world, where I still am today. But that journey led me to some pretty cool things. I've probably done several, probably close to a couple thousand commercials.
Wow.
And if you really start to dig, one of the biggest things I did was when I was about 32 years old, I did a Hair Club for Men commercial.
Wow.
And back in the
Look at me now. We all the same.
Almost.
So
Almost.
you guys will both get a kick out of this, right?
Okay.
So I did the commercial down in South Florida. This was back in the day. I don't know if you guys remember, way back in the day with Cy Sperlin, which I'm not just the president, but I'm also, And so I did that commercial, and the photo that they used of me coming out of the pool and flipping my hair back was like the highest viewed, whatever. And it was about 2 years later, my hair really started falling out, because it hadn't.
Okay.
I had some hair, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I called up Amy Sperlin, which was Cy's wife, and said, hey, can we barter out something? And I had a contract on my desk about 24 hours later, and I became the Hair Club for Men guy. And so it's most of it's been scrubbed as part of my exit contract. Years later, they were required to remove stuff, but you can still find, stuff on Facebook and other places where my Hair Club stuff is still there.
That's awesome.
What happened was, though, I was mainly just bartering out. Maybe this is the entrepreneurial stuff again. I was just kind of bartering out, free hair, in essence, to do some commercials for them. And then at one point, when it came time to renew my contract, I drove down to Boca and sat with the new VP of marketing. And I said, this is the demarcation line. I'm either going to be all in or I'm going to stop. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I just went to the world in infomercials is small, right?
Okay.
I said, I just went to an audition for Iams Pet Foods to be the national spokesperson for Iams Pet Foods. And I could hear the casting director, oh, that's the Hair Club guy, right? So I'm like, okay, so either I got to stop or we got to make it worth my while. And so I really leveraged the contract going forward from there. And then years later, this is what you guys will get a kick out of. In fact, probably have something. Years later, when I called them up, I said, I'm done wearing hair. I don't want to do this anymore. It's every 2 weeks. 3 hours in the
Right.
chair. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, we've changed direction. We're more Hispanic market. We're younger. I'm like, oh, that's fine. That's fine. And so my contract ended. I shaved my head, and my buddy at
Okay.
work said, have you tried this thing called head blade? And I said, no.
Hmm.
This is what it looks like.
I've seen
Yeah,
it.
I've
I've seen
seen
that.
it. My
I said,
brother has
Yeah.
it.
yeah. So you'll really like this then. And
Okay.
so I go on LinkedIn and I look
Yeah.
up head blade, and the founder is called Todd Green. And
Yeah.
I messaged him on LinkedIn and said, hey, I'm the hair club for men guy. My contract just ended. We should get together and do some killer commercials, right? And it took a little longer than 24 hours, but ultimately I flew out to California, met with him, and I became the head blade guy.
Check that out. So I'm sure I've seen you before because I remember those commercials.
I got paid to wear hair, and I got paid to shave my head.
If that's not entrepreneurship, I mean, capitalizing the opportunities.
But you know what? The one thing is, Tom, I think you were a little misleading in the beginning. You said, why would they want to hear from me? I'm not interesting. Wait,
No,
you're the
no. The
hair
whole
club
time
for
you
men
say, I'm
guy.
like, I'm not interesting. He
Yeah,
graduated the top of his smiling. He
yeah.
graduated top of his class.
Number
Went
one.
on to become number one. Went on to become a Chinook pilot. Went on to open his own flower shop. While it was profitable, he sold it. Went on to seize the opportunity to work for Hair Club for Men. He got tired of that and said, "Listen, man, I'll shave my head if you pay me."
Hold up,
Interesting.
hold up. The best part is, Dre, imagine, let me buy something from you, but I want to use not your money, but your credit, Dre, for
Your
90
credit.
days.
Your credit. This
How
is a
did that even
master.
work?
This is a mastermind, Tom. Tom, tell me you have a book, Tom. Tell me you have a book.
I don't have a book. So many people have said I should write a book, but I haven't written a book yet. And so fast forward, that was about a 5-year deal, and Todd unfortunately passed. The founder passed, and the company got sold to a salon company. They're still doing some promotion on Instagram and some of the social media places, but and I think you can still find some of my stuff if you were just to log in and Google on YouTube hair club for men or head blade videos. You'd probably still see some of my stuff out there, but that one I didn't make
I'm
a
sure.
rub, but I had the hair club stuff has all been scrubbed, but the head blade stuff is.
Yeah, I'm sure the head blade. I'm sure I've seen you before because I remember when it came out. I believe he started kind of small. And then whenever I was watching, kind of tracked how he had to get a warehouse. The hair blade guy, he had to get a warehouse and that sort of thing, and it grew and grew and grew. I was just fascinated about the business, the entrepreneurship behind
Yeah.
it. So I'm sure I've seen you in some commercial or something. So
Yeah, he was Todd was a very interesting guy, an entrepreneur, and he was a one-man show. He had a few employees for fulfillment and stuff like that, but he flew to China. He negotiated the molding and the product, and he did everything. And it
wow.
was, which was actually kind of challenging sometimes, because in this day and age, not even back 5 years ago, how long content lasts is like 24 hours or a week,
Yeah.
right? But so I'd go and I had a buddy in Orlando, and we'd just do some different shooting around his house, and I'd do some different little testimonials, and then he would want to scrutinize it a little bit, and it would be delayed, a month, 2 months before it even got aired, and so that part was a challenge, but we had worked through it, and then in fact I still have his last voicemail to me
Wow.
before he passed, because he was checking
Wow.
on me, because
Yeah.
I'm a 2-time now cancer survivor. So
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Wow.
man.
thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just finished.
Fascinating.
In fact, I'd like to kind of erase 2023, but
Sure.
we're here in
Sure.
2024, and I'm feeling better every day. So that's a whole
Yeah.
nother story.
I know the story.
So,
So tell me this. One area that you touched on is real estate. So you clearly have this entrepreneurial bug, right? And see, it sounds like it was built way back when you were working on the farm, that sort of thing. Maybe it came from genes as well. At any rate, you're into real estate as well. Talk to me about what you're doing in real estate. Are you currently doing things in real estate? Or is that something you've done in the past?
I am not. When I left that world, this is way back, way before the Airbnbs and I think you had someone on that does the hack, whatever the house hack that you had on,
Yeah,
Yeah.
way before
yeah.
any of that kind of stuff. And so my brother's a big time in the real estate world. I mean, very very high level with on his own stuff. So
Okay.
raising the kids, doing other stuff, managing properties is not all it's cracked up to be.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the way the laws are written in certain states that,
Mm-hmm.
they're obviously designed to protect the tenants, which is fine. And it lost its appeal to me in terms of wanting to do that. It's a great mechanism for gaining wealth. I will never disagree with that long term, as long as you don't need to be liquid. But I just never, pursued it. I got caught up in the tech world and have stayed. One of the things, I don't know if you know the term individual contributor and what that means in the sales world. Individual
Mm.
contributor means you don't manage people. And I made a promise to my wife and when the kids were younger that I'm never going to miss the soccer, the piano, the dance. I'm never going to miss a thing. And really the only way you can do that is to, even as your career pathing in a sales environment, is stay an individual contributor. And even though I think, in fact, I have people that call me as their life coach, and I think I have the skill sets to help people, guide people, train people, mentor people.
Mm-hmm.
Professionally, like I said, I had stayed for most of my career an individual contributor. So, and I think that's important. I have friends that are C-level guys that, second marriage, kids they don't know, and yeah, successful career pathing, but not necessarily in their personal lives.
One comment to that, real quick. You mentioned you have a bunch of friends who are C-level guys, second marriage. There was a Forbes um, special series, I don't know, about 10 years back, and it showcased the top, executives across a number of different companies and different industries. And I was just curious. I went through the list, and it gives a little brief bio. I'd say, if I were to guess, 85% of them had been on their second or third marriage.
Oh
They're
yeah.
at the top of their game, right?
Mhm.
And all of them had sacrificed their marriages.
Yep.
So what you're saying about, setting family first and all that, that's a good priority to have if you really value that over the success. So something.
Well, I say, I'm going on this year will be 39 years married and
Congrats.
44 together, and to the same person.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a blessing.
You gotta say that nowadays.
A lot of people that have been married for 40 years. Yeah.
Right.
Way
So
to
yeah.
I read something a while ago, and when I was a young man in my 20s, I think all 20 years old, or most of them, the question was, you can only have one of the two. Would you rather have the best career for the rest of your life or the best wife, soulmate partner, or whomever? And at that age, I was like, man, I need some money. I want the best career. But as you got older, as I got older, and then the article said as men become a little more mature, 35, 40, they switch. They're like, you know what? They would rather have that best partner for the rest of their
Yeah.
life instead of that job or that career. But it's just
Yeah.
how we evolve and how prioritization changes. And to be with someone that you want to be with for, and wants to be with you for such a long period of time, that's the blessing right there. That's the success, the true
Mhm.
measure, I would think, of success.
I
So,
went, I lived through that era of the dinks, which is kind of coming back now,
mhm.
the dual income, no kids era. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually really, I don't like what I see happening in terms of people choosing not to have children. I think it's just the most
Yeah.
rewarding thing you could
Mm.
possibly do in your life, and that's probably the reason that we are here is to
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
replace ourselves. And then and now I see, so full disclosure, my third child, my last son, is getting married next Saturday. Um,
Congratulations.
Right.
I have
Yeah.
I have 3 granddaughters now, so I
Wow.
have 3 kids and then 3 granddaughters. But as so the dinks was kind of a thing back then, and I see the trend of I'm 61, and in the last year I've lost 2 friends that were 61 and 63,
Wow.
and the outpouring of love and support and family and core friendships. I mean, 300 or 400 people at a funeral says a lot about
Mm,
somebody.
sure.
Um, so yeah, I think I've always chose to be. In fact, I used to read my kids this poem about my promise to my children, and it's just I'm going to be a bloodhound. I'm going to hunt you down. I'm going to and if you don't say I hate you at least once, probably I haven't done my job well enough. Uh, that's because of how much I love you, and
Yeah.
so I think it's very important. And I don't know if you guys have children or not. I didn't do my
We
research on
do.
that, but
We do.
it's extremely rewarding, frustrating, all in one.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when I look at my adult children and where they are, it brings a lot of joy to my wife and I.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's
It's you've probably heard this before, Tom, and I'll pass it over to Smiley here. A grandparent friend of mine was telling me that he said grandkids are God's way of rewarding parents for not killing their kids. You ever heard that before?
I'll
I
tell you,
mean,
it's the saying of I love my grandchildren so much I wish I had them first
yeah,
is very
right.
very, very true. And it's
Yeah,
sad that, unfortunately, and you mentioned the career of the wife. It's sad that you know when you're trying to work and earn money and all that when your kids are young, and when you should be spending most of your time with them versus you're old and without the kids, and now you're making more money and you're retirement. It's kind of, I wish it wasn't like that. I wish
yeah,
wish you could reverse that a little bit, but I'm not necessarily an advocate that more money makes for better parenting and kids either.
yeah.
So
True,
yeah.
true.
so you mentioned the arc. If I do the arc of Tom, you mentioned from the farms through the military, helicopters, flowers, real estate. Then you mentioned technology.
Yep.
So how
Yeah,
are you doing flower technology, military technology, or
right.
how does that fill into the puzzle?
I often, I didn't graduate from college as an engineer, but I have a very engineer brain.
Mhm.
Men, the old men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and I think it's part of the testing that you go through to become a pilot, which is the mental acuity and things like that, being able to not panic in emergency situations, and the old saying of run towards a fire like a cop would do versus scream and run and duck under a table. And you look at somebody like Sully, who landed that plane on the Hudson. I
Yeah.
don't know if you guys ever
Mhm.
get a chance to watch one of his follow-up interviews where he talks for about an hour, literally second by second, and what was going through his mind. As a pilot, I know what was happening in that cockpit, right? And the way he handled that, I mean, whether it's God's intervention or what, the right person was in control of that plane at the right time, because not everybody would have been able to respond to that. So I'm not necessarily an engineer, but that's, my brain is very compartmentalized. So when I decided I needed to settle into a real job, and I continue to do the acting stuff. I still do today. In fact, I have an audition this afternoon, but
Nice.
I needed some stability, and technology in wireless was first starting to appear, way before iPhones or anything like that. So the I had some friends in the construction business that were using this little beep beep thing called Nextel. I don't know if you
Yeah,
guys are old enough to know.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's like a walkie-talkie.
yeah, I went to work for
Yeah.
Nextel, and that's kind of so where my wireless career started. Nextel eventually got bought or merged with Sprint. Did
Hmm.
some very cool stuff with Nextel, but then I moved to Sprint. I moved to AT&T, staying on the wireless
Okay.
side, wireless like the business side of it for businesses and consumers. And then I moved over to the infrastructure side. So one of the largest tower companies. So most of the cell companies don't own the towers. There's tower companies, and there's three big ones in the world. One of the biggest ones is American Tower, and I moved over to American Tower on managing all the towers that they owned in Florida and Puerto Rico for AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. There's a lot of other stuff that goes on towers. It would blow your mind. It would really blow your mind if I told you some of the stuff that goes on towers, especially the government stuff. It's kind of creepy. But and then I moved over even one more step to because I had managed the NASCAR account when I was with Nextel, when I went to American Tower, and we were building out infrastructure in the racetracks for NASCAR. So it takes a tremendous amount of technology to handle traffic when there's 150,000 people in one place, right? And so you have to build. It's the old, golf ball through a garden hose thing. You have to build it to take that golf ball, 1 or 2 or 5 times a year. It's like in a football stadium, there's only 11 home games, maybe 12 home games that you need that capacity, but the carriers have to spend billions of dollars.
Is it bandwidth? Is that bandwidth?
It's capacity. Yeah.
Capacity.
So how many? Okay. Yeah. So RF radio frequencies, it's finite. It's a channel, and this is classic example that you can relate to when you're driving down a highway, when you're talking on your phone and you drop a call. That's because what's happening is there's the tower that you're connected to needs to switch to the next one, but there's too many people already on that. So they're waiting for somebody to hang up so they can switch you. And if it doesn't happen, and then the switch doesn't happen and you drop your call. And that's a capacity related issue because each tower it has a finite amount of calls it can handle, or traffic data it can handle. And it's the same things in a stadium. So if you're in a stadium or a racetrack, where there's 100,000 people, then the normal network that's around that can't handle all those people. So you have to literally build a bunch more. Like there's 278 antennas in Daytona International Speedway alone.
Gotcha.
Right. So just to handle that capacity. And then a few years ago, I moved. I had one of the customers, as I mentioned, there's a lot of customers on our towers. One of the customers is a company called Senate, and they're in this what's called the low power wide area network business. I was very intrigued. It's huge in Europe, working its way to the U.S. It's kind of like the early stages when Wi-Fi first got announced. This is kind of where we are in the LoRaWAN. It's called LoRa WAN, which stands for long range wireless access network, wide area network. And so, like my water meter, for example, wakes up every 3 hours and says, "Here I am." It talks on my network, and the water meter company, takes that data from our network and sends it right into, in this case, Hillsborough County's billing system. So they don't have to drive trucks anymore. They don't have to do anything. It's all being wirelessly read, and that battery in that water meter will last, because it's such a tiny amount of data, will last 10 to 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And so that's the technology I'm in today. So I do.
Interesting.
That's my real job.
Yeah. Fascinating. Wow. Go
ahead, Drake. No, I was going to say, again, I keep coming back to the first statement. I'm not that interesting. I did, Drake. I think Tom has his own podcast titled "I'm Not That Interesting," because there's so many things that you said that we could spend an hour on different facets of what you talked about. That it's just amazing. So, man, I've never thought about the water meter sitting. That's why I don't see the guy coming to my house anymore looking at the water meter.
Yeah, there's a couple of technologies, but yeah, this is one of them. Yeah.
So what if
you guys
a customer?
You had asked me about a pride moment, I think, or in the emails maybe. And if you're going to get to that in a minute, that's fine. But one of the biggest things that I thought was kind of cool, as I mentioned, my promise to my children, and one of the things in there says, "I'm going to be your parent, not your friend." But my wife and I always had the belief of, let's have all the kids come to our house, so we know where our kid is, and we know where everybody else, kind of control that a little bit. And so for a lot of my kids' friends, I became kind of trusted advisor, kind of a mentor. But one of the biggest, I guess, compliments was one of my middle son's friends asked me to officiate his wedding. And so I
Wow.
became a preacher to officiate his wedding, and I've done one other since then. But yeah, that was kind of a cool, humbling, request, and that he respected me enough to ask me to do that, and that was fun.
Yeah.
Tom, I guess we could have started off the interview. If this interview was perfect, I wouldn't change a thing. But if we only had 5 minutes, I guess the only thing we could have said is, Tom, what is it you don't do? You're like a jack of all trades. Tom is like, you know what? I don't know what I'll be doing in the next 5 years, but it's going to be different than what I'm doing now. And it'll always be fresh and exciting and new and fun. This has been fascinating. Let's do this, Tom, because I don't want we have a limited time with you. So let's go into the final four here. Let's go into the final four. And let's start off with, there was a number of questions in our question bank, and I'm trying to think what the best one is to ask you here. Let me ask you this one. What's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
I've ever received. I don't know. I'm a pretty glass half full guy. And even if somebody gave me some bad advice, I did have some bad advice on investing in some technology, which was biometric technology to lock computers. And I lost some money. So that's probably overall the worst advice I had. But I'm a risk taker, and I thought it was going to happen. When you invest, it's a different than in being in control. You're giving up the reins to a lot of other people when you invest in a company, especially not a public company, but it's still a startup or a private company, because you're relying on the leadership and the winds of technology that may or may not be happening and how long things take to happen. I guess it's my ADD or my. You ever heard the term CDO?
CDL.
CDO.
No.
But you've heard of OCD.
Yes.
So CDO is you have OCD bad enough you have to line the letters up alphabetically.
I like it. I think I know a lot of people who CDO.
Right.
Wow.
I guess
So when you do invest in that, and you don't have the control of the OCD part of you, you take a risk. And I took a risk, and it didn't pan out.
All right.
Okay.
So for the second question, what's one thing most people don't know about you that you wish they did know about you?
That I wish they did. I think, well, most people know I'm a helicopter pilot. I think that's cool.
Say, for example, we had someone on the show and he says his thing is he's in his private time, he's teaching himself Swahili. No one knows
Swahili.
that because, yeah, he just wants to learn a new language. He had a passion for it, and his family doesn't know, and he expects to hopefully for the next birthday of one of his kids, he'll be able to sing happy birthday in Swahili because he's learning that on his trips. He has his Swahili books in his briefcase or his backpack when he travels, but no one knows that.
That is fascinating. I am a history buff. I think a lot of people don't know that I really love U.S. History. Again, maybe it's because of my military or my thought process and what when I talk about family first and all of this other thing that I've kind of had a general theme here, and what to really understand what our founding fathers were facing and what they committed to with their lives and their finances and everything for something that was never done before. Right? They were trying to get out from underneath this rule of government from far away, but come up with something that had never been tried before. So I do watch a lot of history stuff, but way back, to the early days, through the Civil War, and then the World War. I'm watching Band of Brothers right now. The World War. That's where you get real, and it's like, sadly, I can't imagine a 20-year-old kid or an 18-year-old kid doing what those guys did in the 1945s. So we're all flying around in a helicopter or an airplane and getting shot at and all that stuff. But yeah, so I think a lot of people don't know that I'm a U.S. history buff.
Awesome.
Okay. What never fails to make you laugh?
I was prepared for this one.
Okay.
For the audience.
What is that? Whoop cushion? What is that?
Yeah.
It's funny. Oh.
Oh.
You're clearly a prankster, Tom. You're clearly a prankster. Am I right? Are you a prankster in the house?
I'm a what? Say again?
A prankster?
Oh, yeah. My whole family.
Yeah.
My dad was always very punster. Everything's a pun. In fact, I'm working on my speech for the wedding next week, and it's, puns and full of puns. Yeah. My granddaughter.
That's hilarious.
I put this in my pocket, and we went to Winn-Dixie the other day, and my granddaughter had the button. And I'm walking around Winn-Dixie, and she's pushing the button.
That's hilarious. So Tom, real quick, I'll pass back to Spotty in a second. Here's a speech I heard recently on social media. Feel free to borrow from this if you'd like.
Sure.
So this guy gets up. He says, it was the best man at the wedding. He says, I'm happy to be here on this, this great day. And I'm here on behalf of all the friends of ours, Smiley, that weren't able to make it here today. Those friends were Mercedes, Bubbles. He's naming all these like,
Plan B.
Can't be, They all say hi and they hate they can't be here to celebrate your wonderful day with you.
Hilarious. Well, as a final four question, Tom,
Sure.
if you could shadow any person, alive or dead, for 24 hours, whether it's Warren Buffett or Steve Jobs, who would you want to shadow and why?
Alive or dead?
Alive or dead. 24
Abraham
hours.
Lincoln.
You get to beat Abraham Lincoln. Okay.
Oh.
Yep.
Why?
What he had to do to hold this country together must have been extremely internally must have been just a huge battle internally on how he did it. And I would love to know, other than reading books, like what was actually going through your mind. I really love, I don't know if you've ever read any of the Bill O'Reilly books, but the way he does history books, it's like you're there. He describes the smells and the and the moisture in the air and all. He just immerses you in that piece of history and what was going through somebody's mind, and they're feeling pain and they're bleeding and you understand it versus just reading like this happened at this time and this happened at this time. So yeah, I think it would be fascinating, to hear. Witness, maybe 24 hours wouldn't be enough, but just to what was really going through your mind. It was when my wife's grandmother lived to 100.
Wow.
Actually, so like 3 days short of 100. But it was always fascinating to go talk to her and say, what was it like? What did you do for your 16th birthday? And then have her describe like literally, and I would ask, because again, I want that immersion, like, we would do this, and I would like, well, what was it? Was it dark? Was it light? Oh no, we had gas lamps in our house. Did it smell? Was it musty? I just asked those, to really kind of, figure out a moment in time and what it really meant, other than, we just, I had friends over and we opened presents. It was more like, I want to know the entire, like, what were you feeling? That kind that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe 24 hours, like I said, maybe 24 hours wouldn't be enough, but it would be nice to be in that environment. Because something I always do as a kind of a breaker when I'm with new people, I just go around the table or whatever we're doing, and I say, you can't change anything. You can only observe. Would you go forward in time or would you go back?
Oh,
That's
a great question.
I go
So
forward.
you go forward. What would you do, Trey?
So what would I do? I would I go forward or back, knowing what I know now? This is a great question, Tom. You got me. Give me a second. Would I go forward or back?
Maybe one of your final fours one day. I don't know.
Yeah,
I like it.
that.
I like it.
I like it.
We're about to add that to our question pool. Tom, I think I would go back only because I feel like would I have the same knowledge I have now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You take it back with me? Yeah.
And you'd be
I'd go
there,
back.
but you can't change anything. You can't say anything. You can only observe.
Oh. I don't know, Tom. I'll go back. I'll go back.
I go
back.
All right. Now the second question, second part is how far? Like how far would you go forward, Smiley?
I would go 150 years because I want to see my great grandkids.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I want to see who they are and
How
they
far
become.
back would you go?
I would go back to when my father's father, because my father's father died when he was like 4.
Okay.
So I never knew him, and my dad never knew him, but have so many questions about who he was and how who he was impacts who I am today. So I would go back to when he was a young man.
Okay.
That's how far back I would
I'd go back. I mind deal on this one a lot because I'm very curious as to what's going to happen, but I almost don't want to know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
If I go 150 years forward and I'm in the middle of a desert because everything's been nuked, it's like, uh-oh.
Right.
What am I doing here? What's going on, right? So I kind of mind dealing on it. I think I would like to go see the future, but if I had to do one or the other, I would go back. And again, it would be, to Boston Tea Party or something, that I can really see what's happening and smell it and vision and just be part of it and say, you screwed up on this, you screwed up on that, you should have done this.
Right. Man. I got to tell you, Tom, there's I think back about all the guests that we've had. We talk about going back. There are a handful of guests that have just pulled me to the edge of my seat, like you have in this talk interview, and everything from the beginning. Literally from the beginning, I'm like, wow, this guy is so fascinating. Here at the end, the questions you pose to us, we've never had that before. I'm just like smiling. So I'm saying all to say that, Tom, this interview has been incredible. I hope our listeners and viewers on YouTube get as much as we got from this. The book, Tom, the book has got to be coming.
I guess eventually. I just never really thought I was interested. I've just lived my life. So,
Yeah. And when it does, we definitely like to have you back on.
Oh yeah, sure. Be happy to.
Awesome.
Smile.
Well, thank you, Tom. Like I said, Dre, I think, like I said it middle of the podcast. He said, I'm not that interesting. And then everything is interesting. It's just like amazing. It was a Jedi mind trick. It's like, let me do a misdirection over here.
Under promise, over deliver. Under promise, over deliver.
So Tom, thank you for being on. Thanks for responding to the invitation. And this is a great way to kick off 2024. And thanks for kicking it off with us. So thank you.
You bet. I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right. There it is.